State Department thinks one thing, Defense Department thinks another thing. And then you either come up with a joint decision or you go to the president and say, we've got disagreement. Mr. President, you make the call. That clearly did not happen here.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I've had former National Security Advisor John Bolton on the program. We've spoken about this decision from the Pentagon to pause air defense missiles being sent to Ukraine. We speak about the fact that apparently the Pentagon did not tell the Trump White House about this before the decision was made and what that means, and the fact that this might all come back to the fact that Donald Trump has not put in someone for the role of the National Security Advisor. Currently, Marco Rubio is doing that role after Mike Waltz left his post. So we speak about all of that. We speak about how Vladimir Putin will be feeling about the fact that maybe Ukraine's airspace is not as safe as it once was. So all that today on the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday, on Times Radio's YouTube page, or you can stream us as a podcast anywhere you get your podcast. Ambassador John Bolton, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Glad to be with you. Happy 4th.
Happy 4th to you in your summer suit. We have to start off, of course, with what has happened overnight. We've seen the Pentagon making this decision to halt shipments of some air defense missiles and other precision munitions to Ukraine after a review from the Pentagon found that the United States' stockpile was too low to be sending to Ukraine, even though it was already in Poland. Can you walk me through exactly what has happened here?
Well, I don't think it's entirely clear. I think this was a pretty unusual decision for a number of reasons. Most significantly is I don't think it's at all clear that Trump himself signed off on it. The White House spokesperson did say the administration supported it, but I think it doesn't reflect Trump's involvement, and I think indeed could possibly be reversed. The decision came based on a study done by Pentagon officials who were, before they joined the Pentagon, were opposed to any aid to Ukraine to begin with. So it could be a rationalization of a position that they already held. It was taken by an official who deals at a broad policy level, not down to nitty gritty like how many resources do we have in our reserves and how much can we afford to send to Ukraine. So it's just my sense from being in the bureaucracy over many administrations is this thing is not final yet. But if it did turn out to be final, it would be a big mistake. This is the wrong time to cut off the flow or reduce the flow from the United States. Russian troops are massing along the Ukrainian border in a completely different place in near northeastern Ukraine, the city of Sumy. And the idea that this summer offensive might be launched just as the U.S. cuts off missile defense capabilities for Ukraine, I think would send a terrible signal. It would encourage the Russians to launch this aggression, if that's in fact what they want to do. It would put Ukraine in a very difficult position.
Yeah, you mentioned that that it's not 100% clear if Donald Trump was involved in the decision making here. Politico is reporting that exact sentiment, that Pentagon's policy chief Elbridge Colby blindsided people in Trump's administration. They were not notified, nor were they coordinated with in this decision to pause sending weapons. Michael McCall said that he doesn't even believe that Marco Rubio was told about this. So I wonder, do you think this lack of communication between the Pentagon and the administration is a result of not really having a national security advisor?
Well, you just took the words out of my mouth. I mean, this is a classic case of somebody, and could be Colby, could be his subordinates, operating to advance their own position in the bureaucracy and taking advantage of the effective absence of interagency communication. I mean, the whole 1947 National Security Council legislation that Congress passed was to help equip presidents for the vastly more complicated role that they would have to play in international affairs after World War II. And almost anybody in government will tell you it's a pain in the neck, it's bureaucratic, it takes too long, we have too many meetings, too many studies. Much of that criticism is justified, but the purpose of the process is to get all the stakeholders to the table, let them express what their positions are. State Department thinks one thing, Defense Department thinks another thing, and then you either come up with a joint decision or you go to the president and say, we've got disagreement. Mr. President, you make the call. That clearly did not happen here. Clearly did not happen. And that's one reason I think that it's possible the decision would be reversed, because this is what we call a process foul. And so even Marco Rubio, in his dual role as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, spending most of his time not at the State Department now, but sitting in my old office in the White House, is overwhelmed. And the staff at the NSC, which has been decimated by the Trump White House, was unable to perhaps even to pick up what was happening at the Pentagon.
Well, do you think on that note, John, that Donald Trump, he really shot himself in the foot when he moved Mike Waltz aside from his role as National Security Advisor and didn't have an immediate replacement in that moment?
Well, I think that was a mistake. I mean, Waltz did this to himself by setting up the Signal chat group. And he's been given the consolation prize of being UN ambassador, which is a pretty nice prize. I can say that, having done that job myself too, but not confirmed yet. But if it were really just a matter of a normal rotation of people in positions, they would have announced a new national security advisor. It doesn't require Senate confirmation. That person could have been in place immediately, and at least in theory should be able to prevent these kind of unilateral bureaucratic moves that we've just seen by these officials in the Pentagon. I mean, it's not clear to me that the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Steve Feinberg, or even Secretary of Defense Hegseth knew about this decision either.
And the White House, of course, have come out and said that no, the Pentagon did not catch them by surprise, which is contradictory to what Politico was reporting, having spoken to a few insiders in the Trump administration. But if it is true and there was no communication between the State Department and the Pentagon, is that quite an uncommon thing to happen?
Well, it's going to be more common in an administration that's effectively abandoned the National Security Council process. There's no doubt adept bureaucrats in different departments try to do things in the hope that they can create a fait accompli that nobody can then change. But there should be penalties for that. That really does usurp the president's own authority. And if Trump wants to endorse this decision, of course, he's perfectly entitled to do it. But I think the evidence is nobody went to him. I mean, he has been absorbed in the legislation that's now hopefully in its final hours of passage in the House, our reconciliation process. He was up till 1 or 2 in the morning talking to members of the House of Representatives. I think aid to the Ukraine was probably the last thing on his mind at that point. And that sort of thing, this as I say, this bureaucratic game playing can be very harmful to the United States. I think this is a good example of it because we've now undertaken something, made a decision public, and it really didn't go through the normal decision-making process. So if it's reversed, anytime you do a U-turn, as you can see in your own situation now in Parliament, anytime you do a U-turn, it's a confession of error, and it's very bad for the administration that has to admit it.
And I guess Politics 101, never admit your mistakes, Ambassador Bolton. But Ukraine in the last month has been hit with a bombardment of airstrikes. I've spoken to a journalist this morning who's based in Kyiv. He's been working with a lot of the Ukrainian soldiers who tell him that they feel very let down by this pause in US weaponry. Do you agree that they should feel let down by the fact that there has been this U-turn?
I think it's a mistake, and I can understand why they feel let down. It's not just weapons and ammunition, although that's what is visible now. If this is a Trump decision and it's the beginning of a cutoff of U.S. military assistance, I think the most important effect would be the loss of intelligence. I mean, the weapons and ammunition are important, but perhaps could be supplied by a combination of other European countries. But I don't think the intelligence can be replaced. And again, facing this potentially imminent invasion by the Russians along a different front, not to have access to intelligence could be a real problem for the Ukrainians in trying to resist this new incursion.
And the aid that has been sent previously to Ukraine and that was meant to be sent this week was ordered under the Biden administration and is set to run out in the next few months. Do you see the Trump administration signing off on another aid package, or do you think it's more likely that Donald Trump will tap out of the situation if there is no peace deal in sight?
I don't think he has reached a decision on that point yet. I don't know what it would be. I don't think we should cease the aid. I think we should renew it at least the current level. But I'm just based on past practice, almost certain that Trump had not made up his mind, which is another reason why this pause that was announced yesterday doesn't make any sense. If he's going to cut it off, because he thinks it's benefits him politically, he'll announce it. He won't leave it to the Defense Department to announce it. He'll take credit for it and say, this is what I said during the election. Or conversely, if he decides that he wants the aid to continue, he'll take credit for that too. It just tells me the current situation is murky, and it doesn't tell us, unfortunately, it doesn't, at least for me, give us any reason to think we can predict accurately what he'll do within the next several months.
Donald Trump and President Zelensky are set to have a phone call on Friday. We, of course, know that there's been a bit of a tumultuous relationship there. They were quite civil on the sidelines of the NATO summit the other week. But how do you expect this phone conversation to go?
My recommendation to Zelensky would be to say, look, we need to have a decision here about the big picture, longer term posture of the U.S. toward the war in Ukraine. But right now, can we at least turn this supply back on? Because we're coming up into the period of the Russian summer offensive. And, let's work on the larger question intensely. I'll come to Washington. I'll have my people meet with your people and so on. But let's get past this initial problem right now. I think that might be something Trump would agree to. It wouldn't bind him to a long-term commitment, but it would get this problem off his desk.
Just going back on history, Ambassador Bolton, I wonder, with everything happening right now between Russia and Ukraine, and then right now being no end in sight, do you think that Ukraine is regretting giving up their nuclear weapons in 1994? Because the United States didn't guarantee military commitment back then, but they did commit security assurances. So I wonder, the fact that they've had their country invaded and there hasn't been a full commitment to helping them long term, I wonder if they're now thinking we should have kept on the nuclear powers that they had.
Well, I certainly think when they negotiated the Budapest Accords, they didn't get anything like a NATO Article 5 commitment that an attack on Ukraine by one of the guarantors would be treated as an attack on the guarantors themselves. That's what Article 5 in the NATO treaty provides. But I also think it's important to recognize that the Ukraine never really had the nuclear weapons. Neither did Belarus, neither did Kazakhstan. When the Soviet Union broke up, there were many units of the Soviet military in the republics, particularly facing Europe. And the Soviet rocket forces, which controlled the nuclear weapons, were still in their bases in Ukraine, still had the weapons. Even if they had handed them to the Ukrainians wouldn't have known how to launch them or fire them. Now, it was not trivial to agree to allow the weapons to go. But I think if the Ukrainians or the Belarusians or the Kazakhs had actually tried to take possession of the weapons, it would have been bloody, because I don't think the Russians, as they were then, would have given them up. But it still represents, I think, a mistake by the West in how we saw Russia after the breakup of the Soviet Union, what we thought was possible. I don't think we were alert to the reversion to the norm that we've seen under Putin since he became president, or the threat that the communist system had so distorted Russian politics and society that, notwithstanding the fall of the Gorbachev government, that the habits that had been inbred for decades would continue to the extent they have. So it's a lesson learned, but I'm not sure how you would go back in history and fix it. People were too much of the view that the Cold War was over, history was over, we were going to have a peace dividend, everything was going to be fine. It was totally wrong.
The Kremlin has responded to the pause in weaponry being sent to Ukraine. They've obviously welcomed it. But I want to get your thoughts on what you think Vladimir Putin is feeling behind closed doors. Do you think he's feeling as if Ukraine's airspace is not as secure as it has been, especially in the last on Saturday, Russia launched one of their biggest aerial attacks so far. I think it was like 537 drones, missiles at Ukraine. So I wonder if he's looking at this situation thinking, okay, Ukraine isn't as secure as it once had been.
I think Putin can feel very confident that he's withstood the pressure to come to a ceasefire. The Trump negotiations went nowhere. He basically defied Trump and got away with it. He has had time now to build up this military capability for a possible new incursion into Ukraine. And I think he still believes that the tide of events on the battlefield is in Russia's favor. I mean, it is in terms of ground lost by the Ukrainians, measured in yards per day, at a very high human cost for the Russians and the Ukrainians. But it's a reflection that the Kremlin just doesn't calibrate human life the same way we do. They'll have this World War I style ground combat for as long as they think they're moving forward. And it has not weakened Putin at home. And I think this latest decision just emphasizes in his mind that he can maneuver Trump. He can avoid doing things he doesn't want to do, and Trump's attention will fade, turn away, worry about the Middle East, worry about something else, and that Russia can make more gains. I think that's the lesson to Putin: is in the Trump-Putin relationship, Putin's in charge.
We saw that Keith Kellogg, he came out and he said that Russia was stalling any sort of peace negotiations to pick up where they had started, but the Kremlin denied that. They said that they aren't stalling peace talks with the US. They said no one is delaying anything here. We are naturally in favor of achieving the goals that we're trying to achieve through the special military operation via political and diplomatic means. Therefore, we're not interested in drawing out anything. Of course, the key thing there, Ambassador Bolton, is that they're still not calling this a war. They're still calling it a special military operation. But it's clear as day that they're stalling any sort of peace talks with the United States. But do we see them picking up again?
I don't think so. I mean, I think Keith Kellogg is right. They are stalling, and it's just Russian propaganda to say that they're not. I think it's unlikely Trump will come back to it anytime soon, because he recognizes that he didn't come anywhere close to what he said during the campaign, that he'd get this done in 24 hours by putting Zelensky and Putin in a room together. It was a foolish thing to say at the time, and not only has it not come true, but over now almost 6 months of effort, it's produced next to nothing. So my guess is that rather than revisit a failure, Trump will focus on peace in the Middle East, which he has been for the past several weeks after the Israeli and U.S. attacks. And it would take some event in Ukraine, unfortunately, probably a very negative event for Ukraine, a big defeat, a big Russian advance, to get Trump to come back to that conflict to try and mediate a ceasefire or a solution. So I think it's unlikely. And again, I think that plays into Putin's calculus that he just doesn't need to worry about more pressure from the United States.
It does feel like Trump is focusing on one issue at a time. But just a final question, Ambassador Bolton. Dmitry Peskov, he's responded to Lindsey Graham's sanctions bill that would essentially slap any country importing Russian energy with a 500% tariff. Trump has finally green-lit it being brought forward for a vote in the Senate, which is great news. But Peskov, he said the senator's views are well known to us. They are well known to the world. He called them Russia-phobes. He said if it were up to him, these sanctions would have been imposed long ago. But he pretty much said that if the US imposes these sanctions, it would do nothing for the peace negotiation. So I wonder, is Russia basically saying if the United States invokes these 500% tariffs, which we know would cripple Russia's economy, that there will be no peace deal made with Ukraine? But is that a reason enough for the US to not charge forward with this?
Well, look, I think the current sanctions have been woefully under-enforced. I think the the oil sanctions in particular are trying to satisfy two different demands. Number one, reduce Russian revenues from the sale of oil, but not allow world oil prices to rise so high that it affects the price of gasoline at the pump in the U.S. and in Europe. And you can't do both. The Russians have been selling as much oil as they need. Maybe they're not getting exactly the price they'd like, but they're getting enough to continue the war. Lindsey's bill is very strong because it would tariff the oil not only and penalize countries that buy the oil in contravention of our sanctions. It's not clear he could get it through the Senate with the filibuster rules. He needs 60 votes, and I'm not. He's got way more than that in terms of signatures, but whether he could actually get it through, I think remains uncertain. So it's again, there are people now are waiting for some indication of leadership from Trump. I mean, his observations have not been a full-throated endorsement of the bill, and as I say, he's been working on reconciliation. He does do one thing at a time, and once this one thing today is out of the way, then he might consider it further. But absent some provocation from Russia, I'm not sure that Trump would allow it to go through. He would express, which is what I think he's really done, general approval of the idea, but whether he actually pulls the trigger on putting it into law, I think that remains to be seen.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Well, thanks again for having me.